Hi, everyone. We are so delighted to see some faces in the audience and, of course, our lovely panel on this very frigid Wisconsin evening. We were just saying, at least it's like we didn't get snowed out, right? We got to always look for the silver lining. But thank you so much for coming out. And we're excited to jump into some great conversation, all related to water and hearing from these various voices that we have. We are going to have each panelist introduce themselves in a bit. We just wanted to quickly give some housekeeping announcements and mention a few library programs that we have coming up. My name is Paula, by the way. I'm one of the librarians here at the Waukesha Public Library. My colleague, Corey. So we're going to be helping moderate the program. We are going to do our best to interject some water-related puns. We already were talking about that and practicing them. Please feel free to get up during the program to help yourself to refreshments. If you need to go to the bathroom, that's past the hold shelf on the right. It's a friendly crowd, so there's no worries on that end if you need to, refill your cup of tea or whatever that might be. Let me just see if there's other things. Do you want to talk a little bit about the programs we have coming up?
Yeah. Awesome. Let's slide into a discussion about programs. If you're looking for a program about more water, you're feeling thirsty, please join us at the January 29th at 6:30 for our Spooky Lakes program. This one is with TikTok famous Geo Rutherford. She's also a very educated hydrologist. So she'll tell us some scary stories about our local lakes and just, some of the things that you might find in them. And that one is January 29th at 6:30. It's a Wednesday. For more information about, the world around you, we do have From Meteorology to Ecology with Herrick. Is it Manges? Manges from Fox 6. So he's coming in February 8th. April. Sorry about that. He's coming April 8th, 6:30. Be here or be square. And we have so much more information. Please check out our brochures. They're over by the teapot, which I'm going to make sure we're keeping that warm. We're going to keep it warm tonight. So check out our program brochures by the teapot. We also have pens if you need to write some notes down because this program will be packed full of information. It's going to be juicy. Another water pun.
Thank you, Corey. Yes, Corey is the queen of great puns, so prepare yourself for more puns tonight. Just a few other notes. We are going to take Q&A at the end of the discussion. We're going to aim for maybe no later than 7:15, just because we know we want to have people to have the chance to mingle a little bit afterwards, and it's a cold night. So just so you know, we are going to take our questions near the end. We are asking, to more or less, if you have questions in about a minute or two to pose them. And we know that there's sometimes differing viewpoints on any given topic, and certainly water is one where there can be differing viewpoints. So we just ask for openness to listening and respect in those viewpoints and answers. All right, wonderful. I think that about covers our little housekeeping tidbits. Why don't we start with having each panelist... Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that almost covered things. Just as a note, we are recording tonight's presentation. None of you will be caught on camera. It's just sort of an overhead view of our panelists. We did have some folks tell us they couldn't make it because it's cold out. So we wanted to make a recording and put it up on YouTube for afterwards. So you can always reference that for information if you'd like. All right, thank you. Well, why don't we go ahead and have each panelist briefly introduce themselves, the organization or their affiliation, and what drew them to working with water. You want to start, Michael? Thank you.
Can you all hear me? Thank you, Paula. And I'm from Milwaukee, so I just want to say you have a very impressive library here. My name is Michael Timm. I am a writer, and I work with the nonprofit Reflo in Milwaukee. And Reflo is a nonprofit that supports community water projects. That includes green and healthy schools, internships for high school youth, especially during the summer, but also during the school year, connecting them to environmental career paths. And my role is to manage our Milwaukee Water Stories program. I got into that as a journalist, ended up getting my master's at the UW-Milwaukee School of Freshwater Sciences, and that's a little bit of background about how I got to this position.
Hi, thanks for coming out in the cold. My name is Sandy Peters, and I am part of Running for Water. I'm a retired teacher. I taught kindergarten and first grade, and the way I ended the year was to read a book to them aloud, and I chose, the last couple of years, I chose the book A Long Walk to Water, and I wanted to plant a seed of activism in the students as they left. Be aware of water, be aware of water injustices, be aware of what's happening to our water, be aware of pollution, be aware of all of it. So I retired in 2019, and then in the summer, in the height of COVID in 2020, I was sitting there and watching the news. I just poured a glass of ice cold water. It was hot. It was August 3rd. I was watching the condensation roll down the glass, and the news came on, and it was about the horrible numbers of COVID on the Navajo Nation. And then I watched the segment, and they have no water. They said we can't wash our hands, and I could barely choke down my water. And I thought, these poor little kids playing outside, they can't even get a glass of water. There's nothing. So that sat in my head, and I wondered, what could we do? What could we do? And then it was the magical year of 2021 when I stumbled upon the Community of the Living Spirit, Bonnie here and Michelle Mader from Plowshare, tossing around ideas, and they helped put this together. So with my arms around Bonnie and Michelle, we made it happen. So in the past 2 years, doing a family walk run in Frame Park, we have raised over $34,000 for Dig Deep. All the money we raise goes to Dig Deep, which is a nonprofit. 100% of what they raise goes to the project of your choice. So it's, we do have another run coming up, a little plug, it's September 6th, and anything to do with water is passionate, so a passion of mine, so thank you.
My name is Jayne Jenks. I work for Waukesha County Parks and Land Use. I am a conservation specialist. I have been there for a really long time, 33 years. So my job specifically is that I'm a stormwater educator. I work with 26 partner communities throughout Waukesha County to help them meet the education requirements of their, I'm going to get a little technical here, their MS4 permit. That stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer. That's a permit that's issued by the DNR that these communities are under. It requires that they do stormwater education. So I have been coordinating the stormwater education for those partner communities for a long time. Actually, the permit hasn't existed that long. I've done other things all related to water as well. But yeah, so that's my primary duty now.
I'm Laura Herrick. I'm the Chief Environmental Engineer at SewerPAC, so the Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission, a mouthful. I've been working in water resources as an engineer for 30 years. I don't look that gray yet, but I just hit my 30-year mark, which is awesome. So we do larger planning projects, a lot of watershed projects, that cross municipal boundaries, and that's kind of my focus.
Hello, my name is Allison Heine de Romero, and I'm the Executive Director of the Waukesha County Land Conservancy. We are a nonprofit land trust that operates in the county, and we protect land and water in the county, and we've been around since 1992. Wetlands and land that's at the water's edge is a large priority for us for protection. And we focus on wetlands because they are rapidly disappearing. Wisconsin has lost over 50% of our wetlands, so that is always a priority for us. Personally, I live in Mukwonago, and of course home to the Mukwonago River, one of the most diverse streams in the state, and so that's what personally drew me to water initially, and now I've been involved with the Conservancy for about 2 years.
Good evening. My name is Dan Duchniak. I'm the General Manager at the Waukesha Water Utility. I've been at the Waukesha Water Utility for about 22 years, 23 years. I've been in the business for over 30 years. I have 33 years of experience. So what drew me to water, interesting, I thought I wanted to be a traffic engineer when I went to school for engineering and got out of school and found out that I did not like traffic engineering. Had an opportunity to go to the wastewater utility in Racine, and my first project was a grit room upgrade. And for those of you who don't know that, that's the first place where the sewage comes in. And I needed to improve the airflow in the grit room. And I was just really interested in the treatment of wastewater and the treatment of water. Went back to school and got my master's degree and was able to have the opportunity to come to Waukesha and work on the radium issue. And I've been here since, like I said, 2003. So glad that you all could make it out tonight and look forward to answering the questions.
So we're going to dive into our next question. Water has always been a large and integral part of Waukesha's history from its Springs era, from the late 1800s to the early 20th century to now. For those of you working specifically in Waukesha, can you tell us a little bit about what makes Waukesha a unique place in terms of water and some of the challenges we faced regarding water?
Well, I can start since I have the mic. Yeah, Waukesha was always Spring City. It's come full cycle. People came here because of the water. They fought off water going to the World's Fair in Chicago. They were going to build a pipeline from Waukesha to the World's Fair in Chicago, and the residents fought off that effort. And it's always been a huge part of Waukesha. There's still active springs in Waukesha today. Unfortunately, the volume of water in the springs is not enough for us to provide water to our residents. And we have a thick layer of shale that's about 200 feet, 250 feet below the surface that really prevents water from naturally recharging the aquifer where we get our water, about 2,000 feet below the surface. So you cannot naturally recharge that. So as you use that water, and as all of southeastern Wisconsin utilize that water, we overutilize that aquifer, and we started running into issues. We started running into radium as being one of the issues. Total suspended solids. As you get further down in that aquifer, it becomes brackish. And so now we had to look for a new water supply, and Waukesha made history again. We were the first community under the Great Lakes Compact to receive unanimous approval from all of the Great Lakes states and the two Canadian provinces to bring Great Lakes water to Waukesha and return 100% of that water to the Great Lakes, so we would not have any impact on the lake at all. And so water has always been and always will be an important part of Waukesha.
Just go down the line. Okay. Okay. I'll just speak a little bit more generally. Waukesha and Waukesha County in general, I guess, with the amount of lakes and streams that are here is very diverse. And it is one of the most rapidly developing counties in the state. So our role at the Conservancy is to, again, protect the land that's at the water's edge and all these diverse streams and lakes. And we're very fortunate. All of the water here in Waukesha County really adds to not just the environmental needs of the state and the county, but also the economy. The water really brings a lot of tourism. It brings a lot of dollars into the county, into the city.
All right, I'm going to build off of what Dan said a little bit. I'm really excited now that Waukesha is getting water from Lake Michigan. They're going to be turning off their wells, quite a few of them, and that should really help raise the water table and help our natural resources here too. So that's going to take a while. Sorry, that's not going to happen tomorrow, but that should happen, and it should be a wonderful thing for the wetlands and the streams in Waukesha County.
I think I would just add a little bit more about, we are also known as lake country with all the lakes that we have, and development on the lakes is putting a lot of pressure on our lakes, and essentially we love them to death. We clear away the trees and the edging around them so that we can see them, and destroy the habitat that's there, and then everybody wonders why we have algae blooms. And so that's all part of the education that I'm out there trying to do. I work with lake groups as well to try to help them understand the impact that everybody has on those lakes.
And I'll just add, even though I'm from Milwaukee, kind of one-upping what Dan was talking about. Is everyone familiar with the Great Lakes Compact in the room? Maybe Dan can talk more about that. If there's interest. But just as a geography lesson, as a person from Milwaukee and a person who also curates an interactive map on water stories in our region, what strikes me as I drive on 94. If you're coming from Milwaukee towards Waukesha, you're going uphill, and then you hit the Brookfield Water Tower. Everybody know where I'm talking about? Maybe your ears pop, maybe your tire gauge comes on a little bit. The significance of that from a regional perspective is that is the boundary condition between the Great Lakes Basin and anyone in the room know it? Mississippi River Basin. And if you kind of zoom out in your mind, Waukesha is right there, at this interesting place where you're near this subcontinental divide. So that's sort of a geographic thing I just wanted to offer.
Thank you so much. All right. On a local level, what do you think are some of the biggest water issues for those of us in Waukesha and also more broadly in southeastern Wisconsin and the rest of our state? So you can take that for super local, or you can expand it out to Wisconsin more generally. But what do you think are some of the biggest issues we're facing in our Wisconsin, in southeastern Wisconsin and Wisconsin generally? And yep, feel free to take the mic and pass it, or go ahead, Michael, and then go from there.
I'll be short, but and there's a lot, of course, that we'll probably touch on, and climate resilience is a big one. But what I want to offer to us to think about is thinking in terms of watershed as a mode of solving these sort of large interboundary problems. And does everyone know what I mean when I say a watershed? It's been mentioned here a couple times, that maybe that's not conceptualized the same way that some of us geography people think about it. I like to describe it as the area of land that drains into a body of water. And when we start thinking in terms of a watershed and how we connect to our local watershed, which is always a subset of a larger watershed, which shows how we're connected in certain ways, instead of thinking of municipalities or counties or those sort of straight line boundaries that divide us, that can be a way to try to solve some of these large problems that, I won't take up the whole time talking about what all they are, but they're challenging. They cross boundaries, so we have to kind of think outside of those boundaries to solve them. So that's what I'd offer up for. That's a cognitive kind of issue that we're facing, but I think that's a big one.
I'm going to point at Laura as I say this. I think chlorides are going to be huge. I think we're just figuring that out. And I'm pointing at Laura because she's probably going to talk about this. They just completed a huge chloride study of Southeast Wisconsin. And we're going to have chloride issues. And it's really hard because we need safe streets. We all understand that. We have to have safe streets. But at the same time, we also need to limit our salt use. And so we kind of need to reset everybody's minds to not demand perfect roads right away, that sort of thing. That's a hard sell. But, you've got places like Madison that have had to close down a well because it's actually starting to taste salty. They can taste it. In New York, they've had lakes that don't turn over anymore because they've gotten too salty. That salt water is more dense. It stays at the bottom of the lake, and then the lake doesn't do its natural turnover cycle. We're not there yet, and that's about as much as I can say. We're not there yet. I've been working with a group called Wisconsin Saltwise to try to raise awareness. Allison Madison runs that group, and she does a fantastic job, and we're getting the word out. There's a lot to be done.
Stole my thunder. No, just kidding. We're not done with the chloride study yet, but we are doing the sewer pack. We are doing a regional chloride impact study right now, and we're 4 technical reports done, 3 more to go. And one of those is looking at the trends of chloride in our lakes. Actually, that draft is out, but we're working on the rivers right now. And overall, yes, all the lakes are rising in their chloride levels. All our natural water bodies are getting worse. So what can we do? It's basically once chloride's in the environment, it's going to move through the water. It's not removed. It's not eaten up. It's so how can we reduce it? Not only road salting, but private salting. If you've seen the parking lots at some of your big box stores, they shouldn't be white after an event, but they are. And also water softeners too is another big source. And there's other agricultural fertilizers as well. So that's a big one. I think I was also going to say the loss of environmental corridors. We are fighting hard to protect our wetlands and our woodlands, but they are getting nibbled at from all sides from development. And that's a big concern. And then we're actually concerned about the quality of what's left too. It's a whole different, the numbers are good. We're holding our own on and protecting our environmental corridors. A lot of those are along our major rivers. But the quality with invasive species and others is not great. So I'll stop there.
I'll definitely echo your last point there. As I mentioned, we've lost over half our wetlands in Wisconsin. So that is a very pressing issue. At one point, Wisconsin was known as the Great Swamp because we had so much wetland. And I think the word swamp in and of itself, it has this negative connotation that people think of it's disregarded land, but it's incredibly important for biodiversity. So our swamps, our marshes, these are all really important to fight for and avoid development in these areas. And invasive species as well, the quality that's left with the land that we have that remains an issue that we can all work to mitigate as well, trying to clean our boats when we take them out of the water and not to pass along invasive species like the zebra mussels and things like that. So there are different steps that we can make. Sometimes it gets depressing to talk about the doom and gloom of what the damage that has been done, but trying to really hold on to those little pieces of hope that what we can do as citizens to improve these qualities.
And again, I will echo wetlands is a big important piece of what Waukesha really is. And it's a good thing we were able to obtain Great Lakes water because had we not, we would have had a significant impact on the thousands of acres of wetlands here in the city of Waukesha and south of the city of Waukesha. But there's a lot of emerging contaminants in water and water supply also. And we fear for being able to treat and constantly be able to provide that water to our customers. Everybody has that water available. When you turn on the tap in the United States, you can drink the water out of the tap at pretty much anywhere you go. And we have that ability here. I'm glad we were able to get Great Lakes water. We have that resource right to the east of us. And now we have a resource that we're not going to impact and it will be here for the long term. But I look at, we could have went down the path that Joliet went down and put in radium treatment 20 years ago. Here they are 20 years later, building a $1.5 billion pipeline to the Great Lakes because radium isn't the issue. It's a sustainability issue. And we need to be responsible for how we utilize water. And that's why returning it to the Great Lakes is so important. And also we have the chlorides issue. We brought up the water softeners. You don't need a water softener with Milwaukee water and with Great Lakes water. The water is soft enough for you to utilize and aesthetically pleasing. So you can eliminate that salt that's being added to the environment. And I can't remember how many tens of thousands of pounds every year that water softeners add that will be eliminated. So there's a lot of benefits. But the other thing is, like with emerging contaminants, I believe that that's going to be an issue. And I know Waukesha was the first for the Great Lakes, applying for Great Lakes water, but I do not believe we'll be the last in this area.
This is a lot of good information.
And I like the going back and forth here.
Yeah. On a larger level, what is a water issue in the U.S. that you would like to draw attention to, whether it relates to the environment, public health, or something else?
And I will go back to the emerging contaminants and just bringing awareness to that people need to be aware of what's in their water, aware of how they utilize their water, and making sure that it's sustainable for the long term. Conservation is always going to be an important piece of who we are in the city of Waukesha, but conservation can also it happens organically right now because, the fixtures you purchase in hardware stores when you replace fixtures in your homes, or toilet replacement, shower head replacement, those are all going to be low flow and more efficient. But just people being more cognizant of how they utilize water and utilizing it efficiently is going to be important for the long term. And I think conservation is going to be a part of everyone's lives. So that would be That would be my 2 cents.
One thing I was thinking about is protecting our groundwater quality. I think we've always been spoiled in our state. You know, we either pull from the Great Lakes or we pull from groundwater for our drinking water source throughout the state. And I think with the PFAS that's come up, you've heard about it, the airports using their fire retardant material. I think we've taken it for granted. And I think we need to get back to groundwater needs to be recharged from the surface. And so we put up a lot of impervious surfaces, a lot of pavement, we need to start encouraging the water to go back into the ground, especially with our larger rainfall events too. So I think groundwater quality it's growing in its importance. We've taken it so for granted.
I'm going to bring up neonicotinoids. It's a mouthful. They call them neonics for short. There's something we're just learning more about. Agriculture seed companies coat the seeds with these neonicotinoids. They kill insects. And so we are seeing drastic declines in our insects, but we're also seeing declines in our insects in our water. And so the neonicotinoids also can get carried into our streams and rivers and reduce the mayflies, the caddisflies, all the cool little creepy critters in the streams. One of the things that I do with my job is I oversee a volunteer stream monitoring network, and I actually have one of my volunteer stream monitors in the audience two right there. So, you know, when I first started doing the water monitoring back in 2002, you could find mayflies in every stream. I'm not finding mayflies in every stream anymore. You got to look kind of hard for them sometimes. I don't know that that's from neonicotinoids, but it could be. We have a lot of different chemicals out there that can wash into the water and do all sorts of bad things.
Water on the grander scale. Dig Deep works with 3 projects to help with water. One of them is the Appalachian Project because so much of the water is contaminated from the coal mining, years and years of coal mining. Number 2 is down south. The water down south is polluted. My husband and I drove through Mississippi a couple of years ago, and I said, I'm not going to drink the water. So I brushed my teeth with bottled water, and I wouldn't drink any of the water. He did. He got sick on the way back, and that's their life too, boiling water all the time. But then we go to the Navajo Nation, and that's where my passion is because 30% of the Navajo Nation do not have access to water. They don't have a tap to turn on. They don't have toilets. They sometimes get their water from livestock, wherever the livestock water is. But 2.2 million people in America don't have access to clean morning water. And that to me is criminal. It truly is. That we just think anybody in America can turn on a tap. Well, that's not the case. And the water with the Navajo Nation, they were promised water in the 1868 treaty. They were given farming implements, they were giving sheep, they were giving seeds, but no access to water. So they took it to court. And with the Winters Doctrine in 1908, they were saying, the Winters Doctrine said, yes, you should have water. We put you on this reservation. We gave you all the farming implements, but we didn't give you water. So 1908, they said, yes, you are entitled to water. Well, they still didn't get it. And in 2023, there was the suit before the Supreme Court, Arizona versus the Navajo Nation, and they were struck down. Neil Gorsuch, one of the Supreme Court justices, said, to paraphrase him, he said, we expected them to farm on the Sahara Desert. So now Dig Deep is working to get another bill passed to finally give them the water. But just remember that 2.2 million people in the United States do not have access to clean running water.
On a larger level, I'll put a couple thoughts out there and people can follow up later. And I definitely want to one-up salt that's been mentioned. And I'll point out we did a water stories series, and you can look online. There was a 3-part series that looks pretty extensively into salt in conjunction with sewer packs reports, but also with other information. So if you're curious about salt, we'll talk about that more. But I'd like to put out the term climate migrant as something that on a large scale is something, whether we use that terminology or not, where water is affects where people can live and where they need or want to move. And so when we talk about migration or immigration and the root causes of like why people live where they are, water is a big part of that. In research circles, the Great Lakes region has been seen as a potential area that will draw climate migrants because there may be even more extreme water scarcity in other regions, whereas our region has water, at least quantity in abundance, thanks in part to policies like the Great Lakes Compact. So the idea of climate change, yes, we can talk about like a huge rainstorm happening somewhere, and that's a big deal, and it should be a big deal, and we need to respond to those things proactively, but it's also on a global scale affecting how people move and make decisions about how they live their lives. That impacts us economically, socially, culturally, politically. In the news recently near Port Washington, you may be aware of a planned data center. How do I bring up a data center in the context of water justice? Because data centers, which is essentially like if you have your phone, like we have all this stuff on the cloud, it's great for us to click something and get the thing instantaneously, but that's all driven by computing somewhere else. And as AI models become something that people put a lot of money into, that we use as a society, as well as cryptocurrencies that require a lot of computing, there are economic incentives to build these data centers. Those require power on the order of like what a major city requires. They also require cooling, which requires water, whether you're cooling the water that's going into to power them or directly in some way like a circulation system in these systems. So the former Foxconn space, a little bit southeast of where we are, and then Port Washington, the former Foxconn's space. I know the Microsoft is talking about a data center. At Port Washington, now there's a potential data center. So policy questions about that are things to think about, not only in our region, but at a large scale. I think you're going to be hearing more about that, and people should think about what the water impacts are. Last soapbox on this, beavers. I just want to throw this out because something in researching stories, I learned a lot about beaver.
Attention library customers. Due to the inclement weather, tomorrow will be closed for Tuesday. Thank you.
They're telling me to wrap up because I talk a lot about beavers. But the folks who know about wetlands here know the significance of beavers, and maybe there'll be a conversation. But there's a lot to be said for how beavers transform the land and waterscape, and there are policy challenges to advancing that ball right now in the state of Wisconsin, which are kind of interesting, but also regionally and nationwide. So if you are really curious about environmental stuff around water, there are some awesome books out there. I'm sure your library has Ben Goldfarb's book, as well as Beaverland. There's a lot of good books out there you should check out from library. Sorry for soapbox, but this is the larger level question. So.
Yes, and we're happy to check on titles after the program and see what we have. And thank you. I know I appreciate hearing the tidbits like that, because I know beavers are associated with the water, but I don't know the impact. So I think that might be new for some of us. Well, related to that question, are there other programs or policies that you would like to see take shape in our region related to water? So from like a policy level, Michael kind of jump-started that conversation. Are there other policies that you think would be worthwhile for the U.S. or at the state level, even city levels, to look at implementing?
I'll just drop a note for one. It's something that Dr. Val Klump, who was formerly Dean of the School of Freshwater Sciences and a Great Lakes researcher of renown, has promoted in the past. I don't hear a whole lot of discussion about it these days, but it remains valid, I think, as a recommendation. He suggested like a penny per 100-gallon chip in to support and sustain the Great Lakes. And now that Waukesha is part of that, it's something to think about as our region grows. His point was like, we don't really value water economically. We pay for the pipes, we pay for the pumping, but we're not really paying for the water itself. And even speaking to like how indigenous perspectives take a different approach to viewing resource as a relative, thinking about, are we really valuing this relative water from this macro perspective? I think that's something that could occur if there was enough a groundswell of interest around it. And one example that's similar is the Fund for Lake Michigan, which is a private foundation that supports a lot of work around Lake Michigan. They have $4 million a year because there was a settlement with the We Energies plant expanding its coal capacity years ago. Out of that settlement, the Fund for Lake Michigan became this entity that then supported projects around Lake Michigan. You could see that kind of model growing into the future if there was enough political will.
I'm going to jump back to the chlorides, which, by the way, this is actually Salt Awareness Week, and it got big enough in Wisconsin that we had other states jump on, and it's now a national thing. So when you go home, Google Wisconsin Saltwise and check them out. But through Saltwise, we actually tried to get some legislation passed, failed, but tried. So about the chlorides, we've worked with a lot of the municipalities, the roads crews. They are on board. They are trying to reduce their salt use that are going on the roads. It's like somebody mentioned before, the big box stores, and it's everybody with a parking lot, right? Nobody wants the liability. And so we need some limited liability legislation. We actually got some support for it. It got written up. It had bipartisan support when it started. And then the Democrats backed out on us and it fell through. So we need to try again, but we need that limited liability legislation because we cannot get stores, businesses, places like that to reduce their salt use until we tell them that you can't, we're going to limit your liability. As long as you can prove due diligence that you did what you should have been doing, we're going to limit the amount of liability that you're there for.
Stole my thunder.
I guess I'll just repeat restoration of wetlands, protection of wetlands again, just to throw that out there. But also collaboration, I think, is on so many levels, and we work locally. We're talking locally here, and I think that's really important to get community members involved too. So we need all different aspects to be involved, not just people that work with municipalities, but also farmers and landowners, and people to be on the same page and move forward collectively with the shared goals. That's the only way that we're really going to truly make progress, if we're on the same page and we're not having these little inner fights all the time. So I think really starting these like small community-based organizations and working out from there is super important.
I will just quickly add to the chlorides quick topic. And I see Alderperson Molson is here. She's an alderman in Waukesha. But we have a dry pavement policy with salting. People want the pavement people want the snow to be melted down to the pavement. And that's how the residents want that. But we need to educate people so that they know we may not be able to do that in the future. And maybe the arterial roads, but maybe not all the side streets and all the neighborhood streets. Maybe there isn't a dry pavement policy. Maybe we have to enact something like that so we can reduce the salts that we put down, because we do use a lot of salt because that's what people expect. That's what they want. The other thing that I would advocate for is investment in infrastructure. We've heard a lot about lead services in here and lead pipes in our water system. Waukesha is very, very fortunate that we do not have any lead services all the way up to the meter in the house. But that's not the way it is for everyone. And there's a large investment that needs to be made in our infrastructure. We are out of sight, out of mind. No one thinks about it unless they turn on the tap and their water doesn't work or their sewage doesn't go away. So that's where people don't think about it, but we need to make sure that we're investing in our infrastructure so that we can maintain it and keep that for generations to come.
Pardon my pun. We are H2 hosting this discussion on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, which is the day of national service. Can you please share ideas for acts of service that you think everyday people can take to ensure that we will continue to have access to safe drinking water, and that water as a resource is protected in an environmentally sustainable way?
And we've heard a lot of really good programs here tonight that are there for supporting water and getting safe drinking water to everyone. I think as a water community, we do a really poor job of advocating and getting that message out to people so that people are aware. We need to build that awareness so that people can be involved in those opportunities that they have. And I think that's something we can try to do more as a collective group, is try to get that message out to people more and make them aware of the opportunities that are out there for us with regards to water.
Dr. King famously said, all life is interrelated. And while he was probably referring to social justice, I think it can be translated to environmental justice and our role as citizens of this earth and sharing this space with not only the other people in this world, but also wildlife. And I think there's a couple of really small things that we can do in order to coexist. And one of that is to leave no trace. So whether that's you're out hiking or if you're paddling, making sure that you're trying not to leave anything behind. And another piece that I'll just say that's probably easy to do if you have a yard is to plant native plants. That's a pretty simple step to take if you have that opportunity to do so. Native plants don't require fertilizers, and they require fewer pesticides that go into the lawns. They also they help with erosions. They have deeper root systems, and they help filter the groundwater as well.
All right, I'm going to just say also planting trees. I think MMSD just started a program to plant 6 million trees in that's not just Milwaukee County either. That's the Milwaukee River watershed, so that goes way up into Ozaki and almost all the way out here, but not quite. But planting trees is also a wonderful thing. You can think about their root systems and how they break up our super compacted soil we have in a lot of our urban areas. So that's can add on to the native vegetation as well.
Shameless plug here. One of the programs that I have out there is called Adopt a Drain. And in fact, Sandra has adopted, I don't even know how many, it's a lot. Yes. So she is one of my biggest Adopt a Drain cleaners, but I have about 300 people around the county in the different communities that I have in that. Basically, you sign up to Adopt a Drain. You get to give it a fun name. You talk to Corey and get some good puns because there's some great names out there. And then we just ask you to clean up around that drain twice a month and help get the organic matter, the sediment, all of the icky stuff out of the gutter area. That prevents it from going down the storm drain. So we're educating people about that as they're doing that cleaning. Hopefully they can educate their neighbors. If they ask, why are you bothering to do that? They can say, hey, because this helps keep our river clean. The water that goes down the storm drain goes straight into our lakes and rivers here in Waukesha. It's going to go straight to the Fox River. It's not filtered, treated, and clean, so that helps to keep the river clean.
And you get a bright green vest to wear when you clean your drains so nobody will hit you. However, I did give up my drains on the corner of Wisconsin and West Avenue because people are too erratic there. But it is a very good opportunity it just takes a little time to just clean up the drains. And what we do, I guess, is to carry it on is through my grandchildren and through my children. So my youngest granddaughter, who's in walking distance from me, she and I go clean the drains. She had the wire brush to put the seals down on the drains. And then if we don't get there in time and there's, leaves have blown in, she looks down in the grate and she apologizes to Mother Earth. She goes, oh, I am so sorry we didn't get here sooner. So it is something to be passed down for kids, for them to be aware, to take care of our earth. And with this run that I do, I have reached out to my former district, and I'm hoping that we get some student groups involved too, so that the voice of children and the voice of youth are the ones to carry on. Take care of this earth, take care of the people out there. Just know when you turn on the tap, get a glass of water, not everybody can do that. So just be aware of our earth and be aware of social justice regarding water.
I'd echo a lot of what's been said. I'll give 3 short suggestions for the individual steps. One is the salt-wise practices of rule of thumb of 1 coffee mug of salt for every 10 sidewalk squares. So if you think about that and do that and have your neighbors do that, that's a different way to approach salting. 1 coffee mug for 10 squares is what SaltWise recommends, and definitely Google them. I'd say give honor and thanks to the water in your life, and as a joke here, but in reality, Waukesha, give thanks to Milwaukee. It's a kind of a partnership across boundaries. That is an example of other kinds of collaboration that you can look for in your own life, to kind of, again, take the human justice element of it to start there to work into other larger problems. And then kind of along even the adopt a drain, getting out there, practice curiosity, and get kind of, it is a practice. We have to get outside of our phones, outside of our spaces to observe what's in the environment. Otherwise, we won't realize it's even being lost. So.
Fantastic. The 45 minutes flew, I thought. Were there any last remarks from our panelists? That was something you wanted to mention before we open it up for Q&A? I know I sent you all a list of 10 questions, and we got through most of them. But let's see. Last remarks.
I'll do just a shameless plug. Mary Ademeyer's in the back. She works at the water utility also. She spearheads our youth education and our conservation programs. So if you want to stop and see Mary, she has information on conservation in the back. And we also have a lot of information about water conservation on our website. So you can go to our website if you want to see any information on conservation.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from our audience? We'll bring a mic to you if you'd like to. Okay. We can scurry across the room. Corey, I need a water pun. Oh, that's okay. Yes.
First, I just want to say thank you. This was just excellent. Thank you for all your comments and for information. I'm a question about the beavers. We have a beaver problem up north in Vilas County, and I didn't hear what you had to say. You have a solution for the beaver problem?
So I'm going to hand it to him in just a second. First, the beavers just have a bad reputation. Everybody hates what beavers do, but beavers are great for the environment. So with that,
yeah, no, I'm in that camp too. This is from what I've read. So there's first of all, there's resources out there you can find. There's this Midwest Beaver Summit that's been organizing. They have a Zoom meeting now annually. Beaver coexistence is what these entities are promoting. Instead of, so if there's a problem with a beaver causing flooding of a property or downing trees that are problematic on private property, sometimes the solution that people have looked to is to kill the beavers or to remove the beavers. But what happens is they'll come back. Another generation will come back to that area because it's prime for whatever reason. Either it has a lot of young trees that they like to eat, or it's in a good area. So the beaver coexistence strategies are something that have been deployed in the eastern United States and the western United States, and now they're starting to be adapted in Wisconsin and in the Midwest. And what that means is they call them flow management structures, where you can put a cage around an area so that it doesn't flood a culvert, and then the beavers can still do their activity, but they don't actually cause flooding. So if the problem in Vilas County is that there's property that's being flooded that person doesn't want, that is something that it's very practical and possible to do, but on a policy level, it's hard to permit it. And so the folks who are at the vanguard of that right now in Wisconsin are working with DNR to try to streamline the permitting process so that it's easier for them to do what they know could be done. Of course, that's very site specific, so I can't speak to exactly what property, but that's when I talk about coexistence strategies. That's something that's happening right now in the state of Wisconsin. And it's kind of fascinating that's happening.
Another question?
Hello. Since salt was a large topic for today, I have a question about the limited liability legislation that you brought up. I just wanted to know what that looked like more, and also if the liability isn't on, the big box store, whoever, where does that fall?
So we actually have a report out. There's a professor at Marquette that helped us write the policy technical report. New Hampshire actually has a de-icer certification program. It's really meant for contractors. And if they can get through the certification program and do good documentation, because it has been challenged in court, slip and fall. And so far it's held up, so that's great. But it's getting the contractors to do their bookkeeping a little differently. and probably take more photos that, yes, they de-iced properly on a property. I think even around here, it's just giving the client a chance to say, only put down salt at certain times or a certain depth, or please plow first and then come back and see if you need to salt. A lot of times they just throw it down, and we could do a little tightening up. So you can look, New Hampshire actually has that program. It's called the Snow Pro, I believe. And that's really the only one in the country. We've been trying to get one. Jayne talked about it a little bit. Minnesota's been trying to develop one, as well as Michigan as well. So this is, we can tell our public sector is really trying hard to put down less salt. You've noticed the brining. If you notice the stripes, that's putting down a liquid, salt mix and using a lot less salt, so saving money too is part of the motivation. For the private contractors, they put down what they need. I mean, they're so worried about getting sued. That's a big piece of it, as well as we've actually heard at the end of the season, they don't want to have to store it. So that we're thinking about maybe municipalities could buy it back or give them, how that has to be in a covered dome. The contractors don't have a place to put it, so some of them get rid of it at the end of the season. We've heard that from some of our communities, and that's a concern too. So I probably over-answered, but there you go.
Anything else to add, or no?
No, she did a fantastic job. I
Okay.
just felt bad that I stole her thunder all those times.
That's
So it's like,
okay.
you do this.
You guys were mutually stealing each other's thunder, which is just fine.
Hello, and thank you, everyone. This is really great. So, you keep talking about reducing the amount of salt that we use, which is part of the solution, but we're never going to get it zero, and there's always going to be more salt added. So, at some point, is there any work being done to remove salt from the environment? Because it seems like even with all the best conservation efforts of salt, we're still going to have this problem.
Right, and there is no silver bullet for clearing our roads. You'll hear people talk about beet juice and other things, and they all have an associated issue that they cause in our waters. So without that silver bullet, yes, we're going to be continuing to use salt. There's really not a good way to get it out. I mean, desalination. That's expensive. It's energy prohibitive. It's not a solution for anything. Hopefully someday the technology can be out there. I've seen the coolest thing. All right, there was a video of a road that they used solar panels to make the road, and so they didn't even have to paint the stripes. They could computer generate it in there. It would light up if a deer went across the road, so you could see the deer on the road. I mean, a whole bunch of wonderful. Needless to say, it's really expensive now, but maybe someday we'll get to the point where we don't need salt. We can do these other things. Yeah, that'll be a cool world.
Just one more comment on this. We're concentrating a lot on chlorides and a lot on salts in the water, and water softeners are a big part of that also. But there's also other things that we put into the water. Pharmaceuticals is another big issue. A lot of people flush their old drugs down the drain, or your body naturally processes pharmaceuticals and it goes in the wastewater stream. And there's really not an effective way to remove those pharmaceuticals out either. So we're having an issue with pharmaceuticals in the drinking water too. So I don't want to just concentrate on chlorides. Chlorides is a big piece and it's a big issue, but there are other issues that we also have to be aware of and be cognizant of, so that we, as we're utilizing our drugs, we dispose of them properly, at the police station or at the pharmacies. Chlorides, we get rid of our water softeners or optimize our water softeners so that if you want that soft water, you don't need to have it treating the same as it was before. Like you said, putting a cup of salt for every 10 squares, that's another way that we can be more responsible on our water supply and on our waters of the state over the year. These are little things that everybody can do, and it may not seem like a lot to you, but if everybody in here does the same thing, it adds up to a lot really quickly.
Any other questions? Oh, one more. Yeah.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. In Vilas County, they use sand on the roads. Why can't we use sand instead of salt?
We could use sand. I lived up in Minneapolis and they used a lot of sand because it was so cold that the salt wasn't even going to work. The problem with it was it clogged everything. The storm sewers were a disaster. The ditches were a disaster. So we are lucky enough that we are not quite as cold. And also Minneapolis had access to a ton of sand. They just dug it out of the Mississippi, threw it, and it went back to the Mississippi, and they just kind of recycled it over and over and over again. So yes, up north, some places it's so cold, and we could use more sand, but there's downsides to that too, but it would not be chloride. So I agree.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm right by you, and then we'll catch your question next. Thank you.
I also have another question for Laura. You said, you said that with Waukesha now getting water from the Great Lakes, it should give the chance for our aquifer to recharge. Is there any sort of estimate or any sort of idea of when it will? I'm sure it'll take a while. I just didn't know if there was any idea on that. Oh, thank you.
I can answer that one. So if you think about it, it's a cone of depression, right? So the cone is inverted V upside down. The volume at the bottom of the cone is a lot lower than the volume at the top of the cone. So we can recover within 8 years about 50% of the aquifer. That's if everyone got off of the aquifer. And then it would take 80 years to recover the remainder of it. So when people monitor the groundwater here, they see a lot of fluctuation in that groundwater level, in the groundwater levels, because remember that at the bottom of the cone, there's a lot less volume there. So Waukesha got off, and it did start to rebound, but there still are a lot of communities that are utilizing the groundwater, and there are still going to be drawdown. We're still overutilizing the groundwater in this area, which is why we're in a groundwater management area, and the DNR manages the water differently here for deep aquifer groundwater wells. But again, the deep aquifer is nice because you're not exposed to necessarily the PFAS. The PFAS is more surface related in what comes in the water from the surface, the fire retardants. So the deep aquifer groundwater is nice because of that. But then as you get further down, as you pull down and draw on that deep aquifer water, you run into other contaminants, natural contaminants, like the radium, like total suspended solids, which is basically brackish water, and those types of things. So you need to, it's a balancing act. And that's why I said I don't necessarily know that we're done seeing communities apply for Great Lakes water in this area.
More question over here?
Are there any communities you guys know of that are implementing some of these policies that we could use as models?
I'll pass on that one. I don't know.
Policies like what types of policies?
Okay, so you can go to Wisconsin Saltwise and you can look at some of the success stories of different communities, at least as far as salt use and the reductions that they've done. And as Laura had mentioned, New Jersey, New Hampshire, I forget now which New Hampshire has the policy for that limited liability, so that's a place to look for that legislation. Sand isn't really legislated, so when you take a Saltwise class, the instructor will always tell you if you're using a 50-50 salt sand mix that you are always 50% wrong on what you're applying. So just saying.
Have moved away more from pesticide use or, non-native grasses. Are there any examples of communities? I know there was one up, I want to say Port Washington area, that changed their grass mix to something that was more clover. It was like a native clover lawn.
Allison, you want to take that?
Chicago and Chicago suburbs actually has quite a bit of support for conservation efforts. So they're a model that we often look to. They have greater funding sources that we don't necessarily have access to as a small nonprofit, but we often look to what Chicago has done with their, which it kind of sounds counterintuitive because we think of Chicago and we think of this huge urban space, but there's a lot of support for conservation there in the efforts we do try to echo.
There are communities in this area that have the non-dry pavement type of legislature. The issue with that is the pushback you're going to get from your constituents on it, because people have to drive slower and people are always in a hurry that they always want to drive fast. And if you don't have a dry pavement policy, now you have to be more conscientious of time management, and getting from one place to another is going to take you longer. So that's always the difficult playing field that you're operating on as someone, as a policymaker. Exactly.
All right. Well, we wanted to give a little time for you all to have some refreshments. If you have any questions you wanted to ask our panelists face to face or chat with us about, please feel free. But let's give a round of applause. This was a lovely evening. I think we all came away with a lot of takeaways, and we now know of more resources in our community to learn more about these issues and refer our family and friends to as well. All right. Thank you. The snacks. Please eat the snacks.